Welcome, James Santiago, to Home is Where the Dark is. Man, it's been a while since you've been here, and I know you've done so much work here at Sound City so far, and I'm glad we have a chance to have a conversation. So, firstly, I want to start off with a hot question, or I'm going to start off right off the bat. So, to you, at this point in your career, what defines when you hear a guitar player, you hear an artist? To you, do you feel that feel is something that is learned over time, or are you just born with it, or a combination of both?
Oh, that's an interesting topic, because I've seen people who naturally, with no lessons, gravitate towards an instrument and they just somehow bond with it. And it didn't matter where they studied or what kind of music they like. They just somehow wow, it's almost like when you see someone who's a gamer, they know all the moves.
Yeah.
And it's like you almost can't learn it to a certain level. Like you can try to learn stuff. It's like I try to play B3 and play the pedals, but I'm shit at it. I'll never get good at it. I try, but then there's people just like, they can just walk in the park.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about the way you're wired that makes you like certain things. And then unfortunately there's the other side of, we also live in a world where there's virtuosos everywhere. Then you actually have to put the hard work to become the best at something, or at least something that represents what you would bring to the table as a unique artist.
Totally.
And even looking at this, by the way, which is I always pick up a guitar that's sitting next to a chair. I can't help it.
Can't not grab it, right?
Yeah,
can't not noodle.
I cannot noodle, and it's got two more strings that I know how to deal with, which is I barely deal with 6, and I've got 8 here. But one of the first people I saw, and this is going to connect to something interesting, is one of the guys I think has one of the best natural feels, regardless of style, is a guy named Charlie Hunter. And Charlie was known in the Bay Area, where I was growing up, as a guy who used to play bass and guitar at the same time on a 7-string.
Okay.
And sometimes an 8. And Ralph Novak lived in the Bay Area too. He's the guy who invented the fan fret.
Okay.
So the first time I saw this guy playing bass with a funky groove and guitar on a fan fret instrument, and he was him and a drummer, I'm like, that guy's got a pocket. He's like a B3 player playing the bass and the keys at the same time. And I was like, wow, I don't even know if it's jazz or is it R&B, is it funk? He just had a pocket. And when I see guys like him, no matter what instrument he's on, whether he's holding a tambourine, he's got a pocket. And he just feels good whenever he touches something. Not in that way. Sorry, I just made it awkward. Sorry, but
or that way too, maybe.
That way too. Yeah. But he can play drums. He can play guitar. It doesn't matter. He just has a rhythm to it. And when I saw him do this, I can never play what Charlie does. But if anyone looks at his records, you can see him with this Novak's fan fret thing. And he ended up doing records for D'Angelo and some other people that used his style. And John Mayer tried to copy him for a couple of years. Really? It was his first record. If you look at John Mayer's first record, he's holding a Novak's fan fret guitar. That first pop record, he's holding the Charlie guitar.
Interesting. When
he was at Berkeley, everyone was like, "Who's this Charlie Hunter guy? He's got the best pocket, but he's playing bass and guitar at the same time." So people like that I really admire, because they didn't have to go to Berkeley. It's funny to have a guy who didn't go to Berkeley. People at Berkeley studied this guy who didn't do any of that. He had great ears. He could hear all the jazz changes and he could play it. But that doesn't happen all the time. And I think the area we live in now, which is awesome and unfortunate, is like if somebody goes, "Man, you're a great guitar player." Well, you should see the guy that lives 1 block away from me. That guy's an even better guitar player, and 2 blocks away is this guy. All touring guys. We live in the Valley. Everyone's a musician around here. And they're all amazing.
I know.
It's scary how great some of these players are, but they gravitate here. And I think you see these musicians with natural ability. And I love the ones that don't even have to try. They can actually have fun playing an instrument. You're like, wow, you're playing crazy stuff, and it's just inside you. Yeah. That's a long-winded way to say, I don't think it matters if you went to school for it or if you got your PhD in music theory. Knowing the theory is one thing. Being able to find joy in what you love and bond with an instrument and make music is another thing. Otherwise, we'd all be accountants if it was about success tied to money.
God, so true. Yeah.
We wouldn't be in a room by ourselves all day studying, working on music, because it's an isolating job a lot of times.
Dude, this is my life.
Yeah.
It's just black 2 rooms of 90% of the time I'm by myself. So totally relate. Yeah. I mean, so you feel you're born with it.
You're born with something that says, I need to do that. And then you, as an adult, your brain gets where to go, wow, I need to do this whether I'm going to fail at it or not. It's almost like you can't get away from it. The ones that maintain that and get into their adult years and actually make it, I didn't have a plan B. Like, I had to do this. Everything else would have made me unhappy.
Dude, I'm 100% there with you. Like, it's a labor of love. It's do or die type of thing, or do and die trying.
Die trying, because it's weird because just to be blunt about it, like my guidance counselor in high school thought I was insane. You know,
why is that?
Because I was 17. He's like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I'm a music dude, guitar, music. I'm playing in bands." I was 15 playing in bands already, so I'm just gonna keep doing this, and maybe I want to go to the Musicians Institute of Technology, or at the time when GIT was like everyone goes to GIT, or I wasn't smart enough to go to Berkeley. I was not a jazz guy. So I want to go to GIT, go to LA and learn all the cool stuff. And he just laughed at me like, "You need a backup plan, dude. Like, you need to go to a trade school. I live in a small town."
Where did you grow up?
About an hour outside of San Francisco, a small farming town called Tracy.
Okay.
And my family had a tortilla factory and a small store, and everyone worked in the little restaurant and Mexican products, and I was the black sheep. I was like, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna go broke and play in a band for $50 a night doing weddings," and 15 years old with guys twice my age. So
you never, even just for a temporary amount of time, like you never indulged in the family business?
They made me sweep the floors.
It's
15 and a half, for $3 an hour. And I was like, yeah, this is not cool. Because on a Friday night, I could play with the band and play cover songs 4 sets a night and make $50. Yeah. Or do I'd say this, a quinceañera or a wedding. And it's like, oh man, I made $125 on a Saturday. I'd save a bit of that money. I'd go buy a piece of gear. I was 16 doing gigs and thinking, man, I make more money. Again, having $100 when you're 16 is like, for me, was a miracle. Like, whoa, I get to play an instrument and I made $100 if I save a couple of these gigs. I can buy a delay unit, or I could go to the used store and find a distortion pedal for $40 because I was a broke kid. I was it. My parents were like, we'll get you some lessons, but this is all on you. This is hopefully you'll come out of your room, because what do you do when you're studying guitar? You in your room all day. Yeah. Like, that's what's going on in there. That didn't look like I was getting anything done.
I know, right? That's the thing. I understand why our guidance counselors, our parents, our friends that aren't in the creative or don't have that drive to pursue a passion of music. I understand why they look at you and go, okay, you need to get your shit together. Like, I get it, because it seems insane. It does. It truly does. But, the people that make it, you have to, like, I was having a conversation the other day about this. Like, you have to love it so much and be so driven and have so much love for it that you have to be almost delusional for a certain amount of time until you do make it, because it takes so much of that. It takes so much of, like, I won't take no for an answer kind of a thing. And, yeah, so I get why people go, are you sure you want to pursue music? Are you sure you want, like, anything in the creative arts, really? Because it's such a crapshoot. It's such a gamble to where, you can make any kind of living, really,
Oh, absolutely. It's not like, if I was going to get a degree in, let's say, economics, I'd go to school, I'd get a job the year later, and it would be done. Even if I went to school and got my music degree and finished it, which I didn't because I was working too much as a kid, it's like, well, I still got gigs. Even if I had the degree, there are a lot of people with degrees in music that don't work. Yeah. So even that's not even a guarantee that, oh, I got my PhD in music. Okay, well, so now what?
Right.
And so I found that for me, and there are a lot of people that did this. You get so self-motivated. It's like, well, can't wait 2 years to learn this. So I just go buy the books and read it all. So by the time I got to first year of like junior college and start studying music, I just read all the books because I was too busy actually going to school in the mornings. I started teaching guitar to survive because then somebody's like, hey, you're 17, you're 18, going to be going to first year of college? Well, you can start teaching guitar. The music store gave me a job as a guitar teacher. So I'd teach in the afternoon and then I'd gig all night. So it's technically a full 18-hour a day with music nonstop for those 17 to about 24.
Okay, so you dove right in as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. I saved my gig money, bought a little SUV truck I could throw my gear in, got a loan to buy a rack mount set of guitar gear. So I was still broke.
Those racks. Yeah.
I had to buy an 88 MP1 because MIDI was the thing. SPX 90s, all that stuff. And it's like, man, my parents were like, we're not paying for this. And I'm like, well, we'll help you. We'll co-sign a loan. Like, let's do it.
So they were supportive to a certain degree. Like it's not like they didn't support, but they weren't like throwing money at you to.
No.
Yeah.
And I had a brother, and it was just, and they weren't in a financial position to go, hey, let's just go buy you a Marshall stack because you want to play. No, it was like, yeah, go to school and, go get a job and then get out of the house. It was very old school where I grew up. So for me, I think what I used to hear when I was a kid was I'd go in there with my little guitar amps and making noise all night. And the theory being, that kid's going to burn the house down because he's got all this weird crap, like wires everywhere. I learned how to solder, so I'd fix my own gear from reading the books at the library. I would have been concerned if I had a kid. Like, he just goes in his room all day after school, and all I hear is music. Then he sneaks out and says he goes to these gigs and goes to band rehearsals all night, and you never see him. Kind of like now. Nobody ever sees me outside.
So, yeah, you're in the lab. And what you said about it being old school, I think that's a lot of that is absent these days. I think if you're lucky enough to have that kind of an upbringing where your parents like were hard on you in a good way, to where it's like, okay, yeah, you need to go earn this on your own instead of kind of like holding your hand through it. And I think that's really valuable because it creates that drive, it creates that longevity in your career because like you're responsible for everything and no one's gonna hand it to you. So I really like that idea. It's like now it seems like there's a lot of parents that like hold their kids' hands through everything, and then they never really get to where they want to be because they're just used to things being given to them.
And I'm not gonna say I didn't try that on I don't have any kids, me and my wife don't, but my brother has 2 kids, and it's not like I was buying those kids guitars. Like, here's a guitar for Christmas, and none of it stuck.
Oh yeah.
I was like, because I think I was doing what I hoped somebody would have done for me as a kid. Like, right. Whoa, I didn't have to beg for 3 years to get an electric guitar. Oh, one just showed up under the tree, and they're like, nah, it's cool.
I know, isn't that it, when it's given to you? That's the perfect example. It's when it's just given to you, like you don't appreciate it as much.
Yeah, because it's in my head. I'm sure every guitar you hear your idols, and you think, man, I wish I could sound like that, or if I had that guitar, I could do that. And so, but when you're a kid, all you do is buy the records, look at the album covers or CDs, whatever, and you go, man, one day I'll have a Marshall stack, one day I'll have that cool Stratocaster, Les Paul, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And then it's, I think I'm at a point now, I'm just to say it, I think I've got most of the stuff I ever wanted, but it took a lot of hard work. But I think you find that any one of us, in fact, we'll discuss where we're at exactly, is each one of the people in this area all have a unique story of highs and massive lows. Yes. We're like, oh, I remember I had this, I had to sell it because I wasn't working, and then it's you don't just do that. There's always going to be a crash, and hopefully your love of music and what you do gets you past that. Because I'm in my early 50s now, and I've done the same thing since I was essentially 12, and I kid you not.
Yeah. I like to use the term, lifer. Like you're a lifer in music, and
it's too late for me. Yeah, I'm done. There's nothing else I'm gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you found your rhythm. You're working for a great company. You're here at Sound City. Like you're in the mecca of like, all right, everyone here is here for a very specific reason, and because they deserve to be here, and because they have devoted their entire life to music. So we're all here for a reason. I truly believe that. And it's a very, it's a special place, man. I've been here for almost over 10 years now. And it's like, yeah, I've gone through ups and downs, and everyone here has gone through ups and downs. So it's a great place to be for music production. And you mentioned before idols. So who were some of your musical or guitar idols as you were developing your style?
So oddly enough, this actually ties to something that just happened last month. As a kid, I grew up in a household. I was the oldest of the 2. I have a younger brother. And being in the Bay Area and having parents that grew up in the 60s, but were not into like psychedelic stuff. Our house was full of like Motown records and essentially Beatles records. And old blues. My dad liked, all these Muddy Waters records. So I'd hear this weird blues guitar all the time. My mother was all about Marvin Gaye and Motown. And So, and then in Bay Area based, man, being a Hispanic kid in the Bay Area, man, everyone had heard of Carlos Santana. Like, oh, play Carlos. And I did have one second cousin who was older than me who did play a little guitar and was really great, and he could play just like Carlos. So I was 5 or 6 at the time. But so those early inspirations of mine were based on some of what my parents were listening to. Because again, it's a small town. I had nobody else in my family played instruments. None of them musicians at all. And so what I heard was all of this sort of pop music, AM radio music. But for some reason, I gravitated towards guitar. So there's a picture of me like a 2 with a plastic guitar. Like, I just couldn't get away from this thing. You get a real one around 5 or 6. But at that time, like for some reason, I ended up really getting into George Benson of all people, which is weird. But he had a pop period where he was singing these sort of more R&B vocal tunes because I think my parents were listening to it a lot. So I just start picking out these little R&B, jazz-esque sort of lines. So I remember George Benson being one of those people like, wow, that's so cool. And I could kind of play. There's a tune called Breezing, which is a very pop song. But it just has this line, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, very easy. But I could just remember being a kid and go, like, oh, I could kind of play that by ear. And then taking the guitar lessons, which is, Camp Town races, learning how to play all the really kiddie stuff. Yeah. But I always had an ear, so I'd always be earring stuff all night long. I couldn't get away from the instrument. So that was one. And then as pop got, I think, more inventive in the early 80s, I started listening to things that had more harmony. So I started listening to bands like The Police, where it was a pop rock trio, but there was a little bit of extra chords in it. I didn't know what they were. And I was like, whoa, what's that chord? It's like a crazy thing, or he's holding a note and it's doing these delay things. So I started hearing the sonics also attached to the guitar. Because jazz guys typically are one clean sound, not a lot going on. But when I heard Andy Summers, like, whoa, why does his chord not sound like my chord when I play it? And then I'd started reading Guitar Player magazine as a kid. It was way over my head, but like, oh, there's an interview that says, use a chorus pedal. What's chorus? What's flanger? What is this delay thing? What's compression? And then I started saving up my little money. And, one day I've got a distortion pedal. And I've got a chorus pedal. Like, wow, it's starting to sound like my idols. So going through that phase of listening to like those Police records, and then it's essentially getting into everything else, because at the time there was no musical outlet in my hometown. So every month I just get that magazine and go, who's Steve Lukather? Who's John Schofield? Who's Yngwie Malmsteen? You start reading the people on the cover and reading all the articles. Who's Tommy Tedesco? Oh, he's a session guy. Oh, you can do that? You can just not even be in a band and just go to a studio all day and read his studio articles. And that really like saved my butt all month, because I'd read about somebody and then say, hey, do you have this record by Jimi Hendrix? I want to hear what this sounds like. So that really my biggest influence was probably that one magazine that showed up every month that set me on a track to like, well, what's country, bluegrass, rock guitar, jazz guitar? And I tried to learn this stuff. And I know that's a cop-out, not picking too many. I ended up getting influenced by everybody.
I don't think it's a cop-out.
Yeah, it's just, and I have my idols. I have a lot of idols like that, but George Benson was probably the first one. And oddly enough, I just got to meet him last month.
Really?
Yeah, so he was doing a thing in Phoenix. My friend was running this music camp for George. And my wife got me a pen. She said, look, I'm going to just talk to friend Billy, who's helping run this thing. We're going. I want you to take a week off. I'd never met him before. I'd worked with a lot of my idols before. Never met George Benson. Never got to shake the man's hand. She's like, we're going for a week. And a lot of your friends are going to be there. And it just coincidentally sat down one night, and he was off limits to everybody, but he was sitting right there, and we ended up hanging out for like a half an hour. And he's like, give me your guitar. Let me see your guitar. I'm like, holy crap, George Benson's playing my funny little Stratocaster, and we're having a conversation. He's telling stories, and that I could have just gone home after that.
Right, yeah.
And having those things, like, it took till I was almost 50 from a kid when I was like 6, 7, 8, hearing his music and going, whoa, and I felt like that kid again. I was like, holy crap, you're George Benson. And then have him go, hey, we're going to talk again later. It's like, sure, Mr. Benson. You still turn into that kid when you meet people you've heard for so many years.
Absolutely.
So that just happened. So that's weird to think about my first guitar idol being that guy. And there was one other weird thing is the meeting him also tied to a very odd thing. Is I think the universe puts you in certain places when you're ready for it.
Yes.
And somebody else had asked me the same question, and Bob Weir had brought it up. And funny, I'm not a deadhead, but I've started to learn the music. And I've been helping Bob work on his guitar sounds for a while. And for some reason, something came up like, oh, first guitar. Something's like, oh, I got really into George Benson. And he tells me a story of like, oh yeah, I stole one of George Benson's Ibanez prototypes in 1977 when they first made him. And he talks about that. And it's just like, funny, well, that's like my first guitar idol. And it was actually a guitar he used when he recorded here at Sound City, which is why he brought it up. It's like, yeah, I had a George Benson Ibanez from 77. I'm like, well, that's my first guitar hero. And it's just funny how you bond with other players, regardless if they're rock stars too or idols. They're like, oh, I love that guy too. And we all turn into kids, you know.
Totally. Yeah.
And I love that when you find your people and you just want to talk about guitar. And it doesn't matter if that person is 15, 80, plays metal, plays rock. You know, at least for me, I just love music so much, and I love being around players who mentor you in some way. I learn stuff every day.
Isn't that remarkable how, you know, I think most musicians and artists who get into the industry and they're pursuing their career, you know, I think most of us, we want to meet our idols at some point. And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But it's always nice when you do and it feels like your life has come into full circle. And it's always great when it's a pleasant
when they're
hang.
cool. Yeah, they're actually nice.
And I'm sure, I mean, unfortunately, I've met some people that I've admired that have let me down. So I've always kind of had that, like, maybe
it's better not to know.
Maybe not. Yeah. Don't pursue that. Just let the universe bring it to you, like you said, when you're ready.
When you're ready,
maybe just let things work out how they're supposed to. So it's great that you had that full circle moment.
Oh yeah. In fact, there was a second one. Funny enough, my favorite band was the Police. I was learning. There was another band called The Fix. And they used to be on tour with the Police back in the early 80s. And
The Fix?
The Fix. One Thing Leads to Another was one of their hits back then. It was really cool rhythm tune. Yeah. And I loved that guitar player. And then years and years later, I noticed they were playing in town here. I'm like, fuck, I never got to see them when I was a kid. I'm going. My wife's like, let's fucking go. Come on. We get there, and they're like, oh, they were doing a little signing after. And I really idolized this guy, too. I learned all of his stuff back then. And then I met him. And I said, man, great. I really loved your sound. I was really influenced by your sound back then because he also was into chorus and compression and all this delay stuff. And he asked me some questions. I said, well, I work at this other place. He's like, oh, I know who you are. And then, oh, you make all that really cool stuff. I was like, well, that got weirded me out because then for some reason meeting him now meant I was able to just have a conversation with him, not as the kid fan. I was like, oh, well, I can help you with that sound if you want to try this. And before I knew it, it's like he's calling me the next, like, hey, dude, can you send me this? Let's talk about some guitar stuff. We gotta try some stuff with you. And that's still kind of weird when at some point you forget who they are, and every once you're like, holy crap, that's the guy I used to listen to when I was 12. And it happens, man.
Oh, totally. And I think that's kind of the universe's way of showing you too, like when it's effortless, when it's like, look, you know, just because you look up to this person or they're whoever, it doesn't mean you can't have that true, authentic, normal relationship with them also. And you have something to bring to the table. They have something you can share experiences, you can learn from each other. And that's always such a treat, man, when that happens.
It's amazing. And I think funny, even just walking around here, I think if you're standing there and let's just say you bump into someone like Matt Wallace. Matt's just the dude around. He's awesome. Super sweet guy. And then you realize, like, later on, like, holy crap, that's right. He did that record. Sometimes it hits you in the head like, oh, no, that's Matt Wallace, not just Matt around the corner.
Yeah, we just went to breakfast this morning, actually. But, dude, that's the thing. It's like you forget. Like, it's not that you forget, but when you can just they're a person. Yeah. They're a great down-to-earth person, but then you remember, like, oh yeah, like they've done all these great records and they're extremely talented and extremely accomplished. It's just like, it's a trip. But I feel like the more you can just relate to people, regardless of their status, regardless of their experience, then that's when you're gonna have all the great moments when you just how we're doing this right now.
It's weird. In fact, I'll give you the best funny one. He's so cool. One day, like, my fridge broke. He's like, you want my mini fridge? I got an extra one. And he walked over with a mini fridge. Like, Matt doesn't have to do that, but he's just that kind of guy.
Yeah, he's very gracious.
Yeah. So thumbs up to Matt, and one of the and so many awesome people who we should get into. But I feel like I'm lucky to be part of this sort of insanely talented family that lives here. Because I always felt like I was just the guy who was sneaking out in a corner and seeing all the cool people coming in and out.
This is a great segue into like, so tell me about your arrival at Sound City and how that came to be.
Yeah, so that's a weird one. It was completely out of my hands, to be honest with you. The company I work with during the day, I say during the day because, we all have the things we like to do on our own, which is me for guitar. I'm a guitar 24/7, to be quite honest, but my job during the day is a sound and sort of product designer. Or people say, oh, you invent things. I don't know if I invent anything other than I just kind of put things together and they sound like something. But as some projects came up in my office, they're like, hey, look, we're going to try to do all this stuff. And they're like, I got assigned a project for a room emulation design. And it was like, well, it's based at Sound City. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know that place. Of course, it's 12 minutes from my house, technically. And, of course, a lot of great guitar rock records have been done here.
Hell yeah.
And then because there was really two projects. There was one called Capitol Chambers, which actually did come out finally. So me and my other buddy, Will, was like, well, Sinatra's cool and all those records at Capitol. Like, nah, dude, rock guitar, I want that one. So you take Capitol and I'll take Sound City. So we're the two design team. Like, I'm taking the rock room, dude. That's mine.
Hell yeah.
I'm sorry. He's like, no, dude, you're right. You take that one. And he went to Capitol and did the Chambers, which is more of like a hi-fi. You think of great singers doing stuff there, Nat King Cole, and I wanted to be the place where, honestly, like, let's be honest, Fleetwood Mac made a record where, even blues records like Robin Ford were done here in the 90s, Nirvana, all of these, Rick Springfield, Pat Benatar, early 80s rock guitar pop songs that were done here, and Keith Olsen's record of doing this. I'm like, nope, I'm here. So I got assigned the project, and this is years ago. This is a long time ago already.
Okay.
And funny, it comes back to, I was working with Weir on some stuff for his Dead & Co. runs, and I asked this, and this again, the universe kept pointing me to come here and look for stuff. So I started asking everyone I knew. I was like, hey, can you tell me, like, what are the great guitar rooms? Like, when you were recording, what studios you really liked for guitar? And so I asked the same question to Bob. And Bob goes, oh, man, I like my own place now, but in the 70s, I used to love Sound City. So I did 2 records there. We did Grateful Dead's Terrapin Station, and then I did my solo record with Keith there, too. So I spent a year and a half there. And I just put in my bag. I'm like, oh, that's weird, because I had to come here the next day for the first time meet Sandy and start figuring out how to do it. And this is what triggered why I'm still here, is we came through the studio, which we both know is kind of off limits. It's not an running studio open to the public. It's one room is run by Blake on the A side, and Tony Burke has the B side. So they were gracious enough to let us in and start looking at how do we capture the room. And I'll skip all the science stuff, as it's boring and difficult. But we just did some tests in there. I said, well, Sandy, what I usually do is, like, if anything, if me and you were going to do like a rock record and cover some songs, it's like, well, if we're going to cover Korn, then you go back and listen to the song, the original, and maybe listen to, well, what was the guitar like? What was the tuning? Did they use reverb? Or if you're going to remix a Hendrix song, well, let's go back and listen to the thing. You always have to have a reference for where everything, no matter what style of music it is. I said, look, Sandy, this room has done a lot of things in a lot of different genres. You've got this weird era where it was a Fleetwood Mac record in 75, but then it was some weird, like, underground R&B record and an Evel Knievel record one day. You never knew. And then you've got the metal years of Tool and Rage Against the Machine being here and Slipknot.
Right.
It's still the same room, but it was
Metallica.
But it was all different setups in that room, different mics, different placements, different treatments of the room. I said, in a perfect world, I'd have better references. If there were anything left over reels of reference audio material or logbooks, I could see who was here. I'll call the engineers who did the stuff. And I said, well, and I said, by the way, Bob told me he really loved the room here when he recorded it. And she's like, oh, where? Oh, yeah. In fact, there's probably a whole bunch of reels of outtakes somewhere thrown in storage. She's like, I probably have some stuff. And I just looked at her like actual stuff. Which is, yeah. The problem being a lot of stuff's not marked. Mm. So for years, and you think about it, somebody makes a record, they compile their masters onto a few reels, and you probably got 6 or 7 reels of outtakes, or just they say outs.
Right.
And you would erase that, or use it as junk, or somebody would take it and use it for another project. This place would just take it, reuse it, or it would just get thrown in a pile and marked. So I'm thinking, well, she's like, well, there's quite a lot of them. They're not organized. There's no place to play them. Like, well, so that was my first challenge. Like, okay, I'll start going in there, and in the heat of the summer, which we both know gets like 100+ degrees around here, started digging there and just cleaning off dusty reels and trying to figure out, does any of this give me the golden periods? Is it something from 75? Can I get something from 79, 80? Can I get something from 87, 88? 91 when Nirvana was here. 95, 99 when you get a Slipknot record or a Queens of the Stone Age record. I needed to piece together an analog history of tapes and documentation so I could even figure out how to retreat that room for all the different decades I needed to sound like when we actually scientifically shot the room to make the room sort of modeling.
Right.
It's a long-winded way to say I had a year's worth of work to do that.
I can't imagine the gems that you discovered in there, man. With those
a lot
tapes.
of crap too, but it's the best.
Right. I mean, man, just listening, because I know what it's like, when you make records and all this stuff, like when now we have things on hard drives and playlists, but back then, it's everything's on labeled tape. So I can't, like, all those outtakes, all those mistakes, all those like jams. It's like,
and you don't know who it is yet.
Right.
You're like, well, what is this?
It sounds like so much fun to just go through that and listen through, and man, like I can't imagine some of the stuff you came across.
Yeah, and the funny, I mean, sometimes the crap stuff being like I would go through this process, and I'll tell you the longer story in a second, but you'd see something unmarked, and you start to remember the years of tape formulas. Like, oh, I can tell this is a Scotch 250, which was only, here comes the research part of me. It's like, well, that was only made from like the early to mid 70s. Before MPEG 456 took over the world. So if I have this Scotch 250, it's probably from these years. So that would be my first clue. And then listening to it and how it was recorded, like, well, is it dead dry? Is it a disco song? So you hear does everything have phase 90 on it? And then you start listening to the players. And then once in a while you'll get a reel. This is when I say about the stuff like, oh, I can't believe I spent 2 hours trying to make this work. And it's just edits for a soap opera.
Okay.
Like, oh, God damn it, it's dialogue. It was a dialogue session. I'm listening to somebody in Spanish talk about somebody in the hospital on a 2-inch reel. Like, well, that was a waste of time. And
okay, so I didn't know they would do that. Those kind of sessions. Yeah.
What Sandy told me, like, oh, if you had money, you can come in here. You got a session. You got a studio. They took everything. I found the craziest stuff. But then every once in a while, I'd listen to something and go, wow, that really sounds like Jeff Porcaro. That sounds like David Foster, and they were. And you realize, like, oh, David Foster did a record here in 1978 with Ray Parker Jr. on guitar, Porcaro, David Page, and then these horn sections. I'm like, holy crap, this is like an outtake reel where they didn't finish something, and it should have been erased. It just sat for 40 years.
So, I mean, back then it's the engineer's job to label the tapes, right? Or some of them they just toss them, they just throw them in storage and they don't label them.
Yeah, and you'd find a sticker that says ready to be recorded on, or NG for no good. It was a bad take.
That's the extent of the labeling.
Yeah, no good, record over, ready for erasing, or it'd have a bunch of splices. And so it should have been reused, and a lot of stuff was reused. But for me to find those things, so yeah, I did piece together 45 years worth of sessions, because what I needed was, that may not have been the master on a record, probably no one bought, but it was still a snapshot of that room in 1977. Right. And I could hear right off the tape machine what the room mic sounded like, how the kick and snare were treated, how everything else fell onto a stereo pair of toms, cymbals, hat. The bass was always on channel 5. Like, I literally can do this in my sleep now. Every Keith Olsen track sheet from every year, and go, okay, that year is kick, snare, 2 overheads, plus all the toms. 5 is bass. 24 was usually a keep X gate. He would take the snare and toms, keep X gate them, just to get the attack, because then he could trigger the reverb later at mix. Because he'd already glued the toms in together on a stereo. This is getting boring. I'm sorry, everybody.
No, this is good. This is good.
But you find the techniques. They're like, oh, I can. Why am I hearing a tom come through 24 and a snare hit? because
Gates opening up.
The gates opening up just enough to trigger the reverb later on. Because he knew he couldn't get to the low tom later because the whole thing was already glued into the stereo pair with the cymbals and overheads. Because he only used 4 total. Like, well, that's a pretty smart move. And then
you got to basically re-engineer, like go back and look over how they engineered these sounds. So you're going back, and now it's all, like you said, you looked over this stuff for so many months. Now you have this mental blueprint.
And called every engineer, called every assistant that worked here. I was on the phone all day long and found these guys. So I go, okay, hey dude, I got a reel from '77. I see the keepbacks. They're like, whoa, how do you know about that?
What a call to get.
Yeah.
You know?
They're like, how do you know that? I'm like, because I could hear it. And because you'd be able to hear the same thing if you went through it. You go, oh, I can hear that. That's a DI bass, and there's an amp bass track. So you see the 2, and so things started to lay out. And then you realize Keith had his way of working. Like almost every band he did, he would apply that template essentially. Like we have a Pro Tools template, or like, oh, this just has all my stuff laid out already. And then you start asking these guys, like, oh yeah, that's right. And I was like, well, there's definitely room mics. Like, yeah, we always put them in the middle of the room, and there were, 67s facing this way. And it's one thing for somebody to tell you that. It's another thing to go, let me double check that and actually pull up the tape and go, oh yeah, I can hear that now.
Man, yeah, but to analyze this kind of stuff, you have to have, that says so much about like your creativity and your technicality and your the years you put into your craft, into listening, because that's not easy to do. Like, you have to have a lot of experience in the studio and with mics and gear to understand, okay, what this is. You know what I mean? So
right. But that came from me being a kid, because when I was studying the guitar and buying all those effects, for some reason my ears took over half. Because I was good at ear learning stuff without having to read the music. But along with that information of what the chord was, the colors of the sound that wrapped around it, it's like, oh, I could tell that. Now I know, like, oh, that's an analog chorus. And then you go, oh, that's a flanger, and that's a delay. And then the next layer of hell, as you start learning this shit, you're like, oh, that's a Boss CE1 chorus. That is a tri-stereo chorus. Oh, that's a TC Electronic 1210 stereo chorus, you start learning what each thing sounds like. And at some point, you log that away. So now when I listen to something, I can go, that's an EMT 140 plate. That's likely an eventide with 2 cents up, 2 cents down, left and right. And you start tearing. I've done nothing for 40 but tear apart these kinds of things.
That's very impressive, because it's like, maybe as musicians that go through college and whatnot, we learn ear training, like tonally and scale wise, and like, diatonically or whatever. We learn like, okay, that's a half step, that's a whole step, that's a perfect fifth, whatever. But then there's layers to ear training through music and through sonics and through engineering. It's like, you can go so deep with it, you can go so far with it, and it's like, it's incredible when you witness someone like yourself, or someone who like engineers that they can hear like, oh, you changed the ratio on that compressor on the snare from 2 to 1 to 4 to 1. Like, I can't hear that in the mix. Most people can't, but like there's certain people that they hear all the tiniest little, most minuscule things.
It's also, I think it just shows the fact that just like we work in these rooms by ourselves all day, critically listening to things.
Yeah.
And when you, especially, in fact, I'll give you a good example, is that it's almost a card trick. I don't even think it's a skill, because you can't go to school for it. There's no school where you can go. I guess maybe now there are places where engineers can go get trained in this stuff. But at least for me, when I started, there was nowhere to go. There was no internet yet. All I could do was listen to the stuff and then go read an interview with somebody. And you go, well, I think it's this. And you finally go, oh, not. That's what happened. I started reading Guitar Player, Bass Player, Keyboard Player, Musician magazine when I was around Rolling Stone. I literally spent my money buying every music magazine I could, every trade rag. I read everything. I'd go to the library. I'd read every book on sound and music they had. I just wanted all the information. And enough times you go, oh, that's probably that thing someone in this interview mentioned about how they used to take the delay and maybe print it here, but then use a pitch to pitch it up and then put it into a reverb and then print it backwards. And you start deciphering more complex sort of rigs, which is now commonplace because we can mock that up on our laptop now. But for me, it was like, I was so curious about the sound of stuff. And then for me to be here, and now that I love all musicians. I play drums, I play piano, bass. I don't touch horns. My wife is a horn player and an amazing touring master musician. She actually has a Grammy. I don't. I'm the sucky person in the household.
That's why you don't touch horns too.
I don't touch horns too. Except she's now getting into guitar, which I'm screwed. Yeah, it's a different thing. But like as far as getting here and being able to pull up a tape, and then it's like hearing some of these players that were favorites of mine and going, oh, that shuffle pattern. There's like one guy in town that could do that, and that's a Picaro. And then 6 months later, you start making phone calls like, do you remember a session in '76? I think it's these guys, or you find someone notes about something else, and you go, oh, I know what this is now. I found so many things that I've kind of figured out what they were, along with things that luckily the studio actually owned, which was I didn't know. So I've by default become the historian around here now, because I've tried to figure out all this stuff for years.
Yeah, man, what a project! Did you know like the intensity of what you were getting into?
No, oh God, no. Because like, as I started this, in fact, this leads to why I stayed here. Is when I got here and I'd find these reels at the time, there was nowhere on site that had a working 2-inch that was available. And my friend Joe Travers was the archivist for the Zappa family. They called him the Vaultmeister. And he had a place called, they used to have it for years. It was called Joe's Garage in North Hollywood. So I called Joe. I'm like, dude, can I meet you at midnight after you do your Zappa work? And I have a couple of reels I need to see what's on them. Yeah. So I'd be doing my gig all day, doing the research to do the plugin, which was still going to take me another year to figure out, while doing my current guitar projects, which is all these pedals. I did these Lion, Ruby, all these guitar pedals. So I'm researching the next thing while finishing that, while spending nights going and trying to figure out if I can even hear any of this stuff, if it's sticky, if it's a 16 or 24 track tape, what it is. And then at some point of doing this for weeks and weeks and weeks, Sandy, she's like, well, Tony Berg has a tape machine, but they were in there recording all day. And any one of these tapes were dirty. They gum up the machine, and you need to realign each tape. So if you want to really get bored, and we talk about how you're supposed to use an MRL and test tones to spend 20 minutes making sure you play it back right, it would have stopped their working. And I totally get it. Sandy goes like, well, in storage, the original Studer's back there somewhere. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, I have the 2-inch machine, the one that was an A, the original one. Which means the original machine that did the Tom Petty records all the way through Smells Like Teen Spirit was just sitting in storage.
Holy shit.
Wrapped up. Hadn't been used in years. She's like, we can go dig that out. I said, well, where am I going to put that? She's like, oh, there's a dead room over here where it's got like treadmills in it and a bunch of other like storage stuff. So thanks to her, she's like, because she saw me doing this every night. And I was trying to get this work done, going in there in the heat all day.
Oh, God,
she's like, well, just stay here. Save yourself a little pain. And we set up a little workshop over there, basically a sound archive little workshop that was in one little corner of the desk. And took 4 guys. We threw the machine in there, and it still needed a ton of work. So I thankfully talked to some friends. Alan Sides, who was the original owner of Ocean Way, a friend of Bill Putnam, who owns UA. Bill's father had United Western back in the day, and they sold it to Alan. That's what turned into Ocean Way.
Okay.
So they have a long history of being friends of UA. So I go, Alan, dude, I needed someone who can service a Studer A800 from 1977. You got anybody? He's like, nope. Nobody would help me fix this machine. I was reading the manuals, fixing as much as I could. And one day they gave me a number. I was like, well, you could try this guy. He's been retired for years. He used to run Ocean Way. He ran Record One, worked at A&M, Kendon Studios. But, you figure it out. We'll give you his number. Mike Wamsgam. And he came over and we bonded. And it was like, so every so often, Mike, it's broken. I did it again. And we tear it apart. We fixed the motors. And so now that machine is fully running every day now. That original machine, which it deserves to be running every day and in pristine condition. That's
incredible. The history that, like, the Sonics that have run through that, man, I can't believe, that's incredible.
It's insane to think, oh, this did Rick Springfield to Tool. Or it did slip, and having it there, meaning now I just come here and hide out again in a room all day. I can get the tape, clean it off, bake it now. I can just do it on site, and then transfer it and go, okay, now I've got one little workshop in a corner, and I put a bunch of my gear in there, and okay, I've got my research room now, and every day I try to figure what stuff is.
So before this massive project, had you ever worked closely with tape before?
When I was a kid, back when I was, again, showing my age, it was a big deal to be like 16 or 15. I was 15 or 16 and be with bands and go, okay, we're going to go record something. And thinking, holy crap, I barely have the money to pay for the 2-inch reel to do this session. Like, we were so broke, this band I was working in, like, you used to have to rent the tape. Like, oh, okay, well, none of us have 2-inch machines, so it was a $40 rental, which you knew when you were done, they were going to erase your 2-inch. You just walk out there with a 1/4-inch reel. So being around that and then learning, for me, I learned on a TIAC 4-track machine that a neighbor had in his garage. Again, I was 15. Because, little 4-track cassettes were kind of popular at the time.
I had one of those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All of those. Tascam, Fostec stuff, the TIAC. But the neighbor's like, well, it's in a 1/4-inch machine. I'm like, great, because I could slow down stuff and learn licks off of records. But I also used it to work on recordings. I'd record my band and haul this big TIAC 3340 something to every gig, and I learned how to record things. And then I would take home the sequencers from the band. I was like, I learned on a Jupiter 8 DX7s, MIDI sequencers and drum machines. I learned how to program Simmons drums because I had nothing. I wanted to learn how to do sound design. I learned how to program the SPX 90s and all of the new gear they would buy. They just give it to the kid. He'll read the manual and he'll type it in. I loved it. So I'd go to high school, go straight to band practice, stay there all night, work on stuff, get up early, because the only place I could play music at my school was the 7 a.m. jazz band. So I was like, 6:30, I'm getting up, got my little guitar, walking to school, do jazz band for 1 hour, because it meant I could play music during the day, and run out of school as fast as I could, do a band practice, and learn the gear. So, and I still do that now. Like, my morning today was slam coffee, do a little work, take a quick shower, get over here so we can hang out, and I'm going to go back in a room and do the same crap I did since I was 14. Figuring out sounds. It just doesn't change. But being here, the level of what I'm doing now is so great, because the people I've been able to call and find, thanks to those tapes, is bringing back people who recorded here from the 70s.
I was just going to say, you've time traveled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've got to go back in time and understand, how these songs were created, how it felt coming through the speakers, like what the artists were feeling, like how the engineers captured everything. Man, this project has turned into like something huge, seriously. And just being able to go back and listen to those old tapes of, all the stuff that was discarded, basically, like, that's a crap take, or that's a jam, whatever. But like being able to go through and listen back after all these years and, archive and save this stuff, man, that's incredible. So, yeah.
It's amazing. I can probably let a couple that were more recent that just, again, the universe pushed me into this as my guitar projects were released. I started getting phone calls from people that did record here that were coincidentally people I wanted to talk to anyway. So if I take one example, there was a lot of songs, like Rick Springfield was here for years because he was also signed a production deal here. And the family funded all of his early recordings. And they managed him too. That's why you see Rick Springfield Gold and Platinum records everywhere. And you realize, like, oh, his catalog's here. So, and my friend Tim Pierce was on those sessions back in the day. So every once in a while I call, hey Tim, I think I found your 1983 sessions for Living in Oz. And he's like, I'm coming right over. And he hadn't heard these things since 1983. And it's fun to hear. And Tim's been one of the most recorded session guys in the world.
He's incredible.
He's just a lovely guy and an incredible player. I've known him for 25 plus years now, but to have him come back and hear what he sounded like when he was 21, and I'm all excited, and he's all excited. Then he goes, I guess I wasn't really that good on that take. And to hear him like, well, dude, no, I think it's amazing. All he hears is a 21-year-old kid trying to cut it.
Here, since we're going there right now, just brings up like another topic I want your 2 cents on. Like, I found that a lot of musicians, a lot of these incredibly talented musicians that we've learned to love over the years, that are so good at what they do, they all have a similar thing. Like, they're always looking at their work, whether it was from 10 years ago or 10 days ago, and they're like, not shitting on it, but they're always finding, they're like, it could have been better. Like, I don't know that many musicians or artists that are at the top of their game that they talk, like, they praise all their work. You know what I mean? They're like very insecure about a lot of things, and I relate to that too. And I think that's super common, and I think that's almost necessary in a way, because it pushes you to be better next time, be better next time, and hopefully, like, maybe there's some work you can look back on, some gems that you look back on and go, okay, that was pretty good. But most of the time it's like, there's always something, So how do you feel about that? Do you experience that?
Yeah, in fact, there's just two things I thought of when you said that is I can't stand the way I played when I was a kid because I can hear that I didn't learn everything. I was still learning so many things. It's weird when you have the facility to play things. I just didn't know what to play yet and how to play musical yet. I could just hear that I was still learning how to do stuff.
Yeah.
So that bugs the shit out of me. Holy crap. But there's one thing interesting that happened is, and I need to praise the people who gave me those jobs. Who would hire a 16-year-old kid to be in a band of 35-year-olds working every weekend? So I thank God they put up with me and mentored me to go, no, you got to learn 4 sets. You get your sounds together. And I remember somebody going, hey, man, you sound like shit. You really need to fix your rhythm playing. If they were nice about it, I would have just still sounded like shit. But that made me go home and go, crap, I better work on how to play Motown, the skank rhythm.
Someone in the band said that?
The leader of the band, MD, goes, you sound like shit. You're playing that wrong. It was some one of those rhythms where you're supposed to do like. I couldn't do that I'd never seen anyone do it. I was probably. That's terrible. You sound like a broken timbale is exactly what I said. And I was so scared that I went and fixed it. But thankfully they put up with that. So the mentorship I had as a kid, even though I was still working on it, helped me, which leads me to, actually I should mention this, is the only reason I was able to survive too between all those schedules I was doing was I lived in an area where a lot of editors, Guitar Player Magazine actually lived.
Okay.
And they heard about me playing in a little trio where I would play all these different guitar, bass, instrumental songs for fun after some of those cover gigs. And I'd play 3 or 4 songs for me. It's like, oh, there's nobody playing Hendrix song, the more complicated stuff, or playing Eric Johnson, Cliffs of Dover song. Because everyone went home and the band knew it. Or play a Steve Vai song just for fun because I could do it.
Hell yeah.
And because it was fun for me. Or play a Stevie Ray song, but all over the place. They're like, how did you know how to get those sounds and learn that? I'm like, oh, that's all I do. I ended up working at Guitar Player as an intern.
Oh, really?
They're like,
awesome.
They're like, you want to drive up to San Mateo tomorrow? Come start testing gear? Because we need somebody who can play all these styles who actually knows how to dial it in. So at some point, I started working at Guitar Player as a kid, walking the halls and seeing all the guys like, oh, that guy interviewed Van Halen in 78 for the cover. That's Jazz Obrick. Holy shit. I read his name in my magazine. So all these editors, I was kind of shocked. I literally felt like I lucked into it. But that gave me another level of like, whoa, okay, maybe I can stay doing this. So that was one of those things where like, wow, I feel like maybe I can continue to play and learn stuff. I know I went left really quick, but that always helped me straighten out my head. I go like, you can always be better. You can always learn something. And then I'm going to bookend that with a hero I met. It didn't disappoint me, but it's exactly what you said. I think he still is one of the greatest technicians, one of the greatest innovators of electric guitars, a guy named Alan Holsworth.
Okay, yeah.
The guy could play anything. And he had come to a Zappa gig. My wife was playing the music of Frank Zappa with Dweezil she's been in there 18 years. And sometimes I'd hang out with Dweezil. I was like, hey, dude, I'm going to call Alan Holsworth to come sit in tonight. I said, make sure you come to the gig early. Come to soundcheck because Alan's going to come over. And I'm thinking, holy crap, he's one of my idols too. But I got to the mid-'80s. I was like, who's Alan Holsworth? And I started listening to stuff like that kind of shredding and trying to play all that stuff. Again, it was like I listened to everybody, but Alan was like a benchmark, and like that guy is like the best guitar player I've ever heard. In a different way than saying Jimi Hendrix is the best guitar player I've ever heard, or Andy Summers is the best, or Wes Montgomery. Mm-hmm. And here's what I bought all of Alan's, but there were only a couple of books on Alan's. One was called Reaching for the Uncommon Chord. It transcribed his songs. So I was all excited at soundcheck. We met him, and I made the mistake of telling him, I've learned some of your stuff when I was a kid. I have the book Reaching for the Uncommon Chord. And he looked at me like, why did you do that? Why did you waste your time reading that rubbish? And I was like, and is it because he was so sensitive about his early years, he never wanted to hear his old records. And it pissed him off a little bit. In a weird way, to go, don't waste your time on that. Like almost like he cared enough to say, stop listening to me.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time trying to sound like me is what he told me, essentially. And it was heartbreaking and cool, but also hurt a little. Like, so I was just so excited to I tried to learn your stuff. The book is wrong. You wasted your time on that. But here's my guitar. We can talk a little bit. It was what do you do? Like my idol just told me I wasted my time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that because, you know, there's been times where people have brought up old work I've done that they really like and they resonate with, but that I can't stand.
Right.
So I'm never rude, like, but it's like, it's not that it's disappointing. It's just like, you wish that people would latch on to what you consider to be your best work, but that's never the case. You know what I mean?
Even your best work now is going to be not
Right.
in 2 years. You're going to sound different, possibly.
Right. Yeah. So I see what you're saying there, and I understand too, because it's like, it's not that he was, you know, like awful or rude to you, but it's a little disappointing because you're just trying to express your love and your joy for their work, and they're like, meh, you know. So I totally get it. It's disappointing, but yeah, that's why I think, you know, you have to be careful, because even though you're coming from a good place, like with the best intentions and with like love in your heart, going up to someone and telling them how much you admire their work, sometimes you might not get what you're hoping for back. So that's for everyone listening, like, just be careful, because even though you're hoping for the best, it might be a little hurtful. So just be cautious when you're meeting your idols.
When it backfires, like, you like me? Why would you be so stupid? Oh no! It's almost like I wanted to yell at Alan Holdsworth for making fun of 1984 Alan Holdsworth. It was weird. You know, and I've had that to certain extents. Like, in fact, you're just reminding me of another thing. And I thank whoever was in power to go, that terrible, because I hear my playing as an 18 thinking, oh, I had a lot of ability, but no musicality yet. But somebody's like, well, give him a gig. Let him grow at the magazine. So I think that somebody thought I was good enough to have a gig, which, again, when I hear myself at that age, it's terrible. But somebody still gave me a gig, and somebody else saw something and believed in me enough that he'll grow into it.
That's exactly it. I think we're not so great at seeing, I guess it depends, but I feel like we're not the best at seeing our potential sometimes. Like, people can see more than we can see in ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
So, you know, they'll take a chance on us, you know. But yeah, I agree. You know, we look back on our older work, and yeah, it's like you can hear, like, yeah, you got the soul and the feel and the chops are there, but you're not fully confident. Yeah, you're not as developed. So yeah, we can hear that, but some people listen back and love it, and some people listen back and they cherish that, you know, the early days of your work. So it's like there's value in that too. So yeah,
it's huge. In fact, there's been a couple of times where I think being in my room as a kid with a tab book and learning, I want to learn how to play a Steve Vai, the Attitude song. I was in Guitar Player magazine. I'm going to try and learn this, and getting the little flexi page and learning it. And also learning the Cliffs of Dover song in the mid-'80s before it was on his record. That bit me in the ass later, which has already been 25 years since that. Because the funny story being, at some point, I learned all this stuff because I had nothing better to do than study guitar and learn everybody's styles. And then that became a thing it took me decades before one day I was working at another company called Line 6. And we were developing a project called Guitar Port that needed to show we'd show the tab, and you'd have some songs that were minus ones. You know, you could take the guitar out and jam over it. And some people didn't have their masters, so we would re-record them, and also work with another company that coincidentally was putting out a video game about guitar. And at the time, this is like 2000. Yeah, none of this existed yet. I'm thinking, well, I'm doing it for the educational and for the sound design and for the history of, like, well, I'll help re-record this stuff. That way students can play the tab and play over a no guitar version to really flush things out. Mm-hmm. But then it's funny, I wasn't supposed to play the guitar notes. I was running the project as the creative, whatever you want to call it. And so I'd work with the artists, and I'd even check the tab and write the articles and working on the daily project of this product. And it came to pass one day that some of the people that were using on the sessions, one of those people couldn't play one of the songs. One was Cliffs of Dover. Like, oh, I can't play this. So they couldn't find anybody to play the song. And I'm thinking, oh, I know how to play it. I've been playing it since I was 16. And I finally had to say in a meeting, nobody knew I could play like that. And I was like, well, I'll just do it at home. They looked at me like, you can do what? I'll do it, whatever. And I replayed the whole thing. But I had called Eric Johnson first. Said, I know Eric now. Let me call him and ask him, can you replay this? He's like, no, bro, no, there's no way. I will not play that note for note. He'd have to be working in the game. It has to be the exact recorded version. So every note would have had to been exactly as recorded on his released record. He's like, I cannot do that anymore. I won't do that. He plays it differently every night. So I can't read my own and literally play every slide perfectly like the record. It had to match with a tempo map in a Pro Tools session to align it. If you played the original and the copy, every single note had to be exact. He's like, there's no way. And that's why the other guy opted out. So I spent a couple of nights and replayed the whole thing, turned it in. And they go, well, okay, we're also licensing it to this game company. I'm like, whatever, that sounds stupid. Who wants to play a game with a fake plastic guitar?
Oh, God.
So I ended up doing Ghost of Dover, Black Magic Woman, a Stevie Ray song, all these songs. I'm like, I could just knock those out after hours in the middle of the night on my home recording setup. Just because it would keep me playing guitar. And then like a year later, every kid's got a plastic guitar and they're playing these songs.
That was an anomaly, man. That like the popularity of that was just insane. Like I never used it, but dude, it's incredible like how that blew up.
Yeah, and how many people are now 25 and 30 that got a passion for guitar by playing a video game in the early 2000s, which I thought was dumb. And the only reason I even did those sessions is because they were songs I learned as a kid because I already knew them, and I go, I'll just do it after hours. Because I already learned all those Stevie and all those songs because I wanted to play with my band just to see if I could. So it almost proves that a lot of the work I was doing didn't help me till years later. So all these skills, you pick up skills. There's things you're doing now that 10 years from now, you're like, oh, I know how to do that because it was this one time I just had to figure it out. And you collect a weird set of skills. Just like the day I remember selling some of the rack gear that I had to buy as a kid with the loan 10 years later to fund buying my first computer because I needed to figure out how to record at home and do digital editing. So I started, the only time I ever sold some gear, I'm like, okay, well, I need to get an IBM PC with Windows 3.1 and start putting audio cards and figuring out how to do this stuff at home and get off tape.
Yeah. Oh,
And it was a skill. Like, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, because I think it's where it's going. I can record at home and edit things, and I can buy a CD burner and burn a mix onto a CD at home when CDs are $20 a piece to burn, and the drive was $1,000 SCSI drive that would burn a CD.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to spend money on this. All my gig money went into buying a little system that I could do that. So by the time I got to LA in the late 90s, early 2000s, I knew how to do digital editing.
So you weren't hesitant. You're not hesitant to innovation and new technology. Like I know a lot of the more classic cats. They're like, in the beginning they're resistant to, the people that were resistant to Pro Tools or Sound Tools, or what it was called when it started, and any kind of new like cutting edge technology. Some people are a bit hesitant and resistant to it, but you seem like you're right there, like ready to try it out.
I didn't have the funds to go fully deep into it, so I would do what I could because I could see the potential for me, like my dream as a kid was to have a recording setup at home. If I could have, and I did have these smaller setup home studio recording where I put all my money in one day, bought a 12-channel little board, and I expanded up to a DAT machine for the first time. I spent my tour money. I left home in 94, 95 and went to Europe with a band and took all of my savings from that and bought a digital tape machine so I could master things to digital, so I could buy a little mixer, so I could buy microphones. I used all the money on that and came back, which was dumb. But I'm like, no, I bought a Fender Strat from the custom shop with some help I got a better guitar and bought recording equipment and kept working. And I was just blinded by it. Like literally, basic, like you said, sometimes you got to just be the crazy person and say, no, I'm doing this.
Well, what you're doing is like, I mean, in our earlier years, I don't think we don't realize what we're doing until later, but what we're doing is we're investing in ourselves. And it's like, it seems like, some people will be like, oh, why are you wasting money on that? And it doesn't hold its value or whatever. Some gear does, some doesn't. But for me, it's I see it as you're investing in yourself long term, and all these things that you buy and sell throughout the years, you're gaining experience, you're figuring out what works for you, you figure out what doesn't work for you. And like you said, it's a cumulative process where you're gaining knowledge and it's investing in yourself. And I think that's really important to do if you're a lifer in music. I think it's great. I don't think there's a problem with spending a lot of money on your craft, and whether just because maybe some years you're not profiting off of it, but I think over time it's compounding. Like over time it is definitely worth it. And I think more musicians and artists should invest more in themselves. Like seriously, if you feel like if this is all you ever want to do, like put more of it into yourself, because it will pay off exponentially in the future. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's so easy to take for granted now how you can go to Costco, buy any old laptop and go buy any old audio device that's got 2 in, 2 out, and have a mobile recording studio. Yeah. And, you know, in 1999, you had to basically take a loan out to get a Pro Tools machine, which was $20,000 to $30,000.
That's insane.
It was insane then. And then, but at least knowing the job, and I bought the smallest rig I could, just another setup, at least knowing how to use that stuff. But when I finally moved to LA, funny enough, I didn't get here till around 2000 to start working at Line 6. I always had a little recording rig at home, and I knew how to do digital edits. And a lot of guitar players were resistant to technology. You know, in 2000, not everybody was into computers.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the old timers were like, well, no, I go to a studio to record. I don't take that stuff home. Or if they did have a studio, they had enough money to buy a 2-inch machine, and that's a different level of player and recording guy. But I started finding once I got here and was like, oh, if you play the guitar on that, you mean you don't have to come in? Like, no, you can send over the hard drive. And if you give it to me in the middle of the night, I started doing film and TV work out of nowhere, because once the Guitar Hero game came out, someone's like, who did all of that? I'm like, I did it at home. They're like, you have a home setup? Yeah. I started getting calls like, hey, can you sound like literally you've got 6 hours to replay all the guitar parts for Pat Benatar's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. We need it for a Disney karaoke scene in some TV show. We need to have it redone. They couldn't find a player. I was like, okay, send me the files on a slow ass, as the highest speed as I had then. I'd go learn the song, play it, record it, edit, send it back. And it was like, okay, that was fun. And then you start seeing checks for like, well, I need all the money I made from those night things of publishing and stuff for doing. I did 300 cues for Bunemer Television just because I could at night. Because I got bored, like, well, God, if it wasn't doing anything. So I was like, dude, start writing material and sync it to film and TV. So I just started handing stuff out when I had time. And that takes a few years, but like, holy crap, I got a check in the mail from 2 years ago because they're playing some TV show. They took 30 seconds of some piece of crap tune I wrote on a guitar. And I bought a Martin guitar with it.
Hell yeah!
I invested back in myself with those
exactly.
pennies.
That leads it to like what I was saying before is because you invested in yourself early and you decided to, I'm going to get this computer and I'm going to figure this out. You had the skills, and when the opportunities arose, you had the skills.
Ready. Yeah.
You already knew what you're doing. You already had a home studio. So that's a perfect example. It's like if you invest in yourself, it will pay off. You just have to. You have to be a little crazy, you know.
You have to hold on long enough.
You got right, and you have to not be afraid to spend a lot of money on yourself and on your craft. And now there's no excuse now because you can get like a laptop and an interface and a mic for like $1,500 and you're good.
You're good, right? Yeah. And I appreciate the hard work. I can see the hard work you've done here, the way you've got it set up here. I think if younger you saw the rig, let me ask you, if younger you saw what you have now, wouldn't that kid be pretty damn impressed of like where you got to be now?
I think about it here and there, but yeah, dude, I've far exceeded what I thought, but that's the thing. It's like that's another curse with creatives and like people that are so passionate and lifers. Like once you hit something, you're like, yeah, but what's next? But what's next? So it's not that I wouldn't say that I'm never satisfied, but that's what it takes to do this at a certain level. Is like you can't be stagnant. You have to constantly be pushing yourself, constantly be trying to be better and to provide a better service to all that stuff, you know. And so I think that's what it takes to get to a certain point. But yeah, man, it's crazy, you know. If I told myself 20 years ago where I am now, I would have been like, okay, like wouldn't have ever believed it. But a lot of things have, you know, it was all, I almost didn't make it to Sound City. It was like completely by chance. Like I answered a Craigslist ad. Like someone here was selling gear and they had a studio here, and this was like almost 11 years ago. And then they're like, oh yeah, talk to Sandy, might be some rooms. And then I got one room across the hall. Then I moved into this one. So it's been a process. But if I didn't go and to answer that Craigslist ad to look, because I was trying to buy some used gear or something, that would have never happened. So it's like all these little things that happen in our lives that are completely, you think, okay, is that coincidence or chance? But it's not. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the universe puts you where you need to be. But you have to, I think the most important thing is you have to, and this is something I've struggled with too, it's like you have to believe in yourself 110%, and you have to follow that passion, and you have to like be delusional almost to a point. And it's kind of hard if you're not that way by nature, like, because I'm more like, I'm pretty humble, you know what I mean? I try not to, I don't think of myself like this like super accomplished, amazing at what I do, but I put my all into it. So it's hard to have that mentality 100% of the time, but you kind of have to, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. You remind again. If I had just walked over here 10 years ago and said, "Well, I'm going to be here now," well, you're a lunatic. You know, because I think the same way I ended up here, which again I got here and never left. Essentially, I keep thinking, I guess I'm done. I'm somehow still here, and there's so much more work now that I'm staying here. And it is funny to think that I get over here and again, you've been here 10 years. I mean, Wallace and Will Kenny have been here probably almost as long, if not.
No, I think they've been here hitting like close to 15, 20. They've been here a long time. I mean, you know, you bring incredible value to Sound City, and like just everything you've said so far, it's made me I think like you're the type of person that you know, you're rare, because there's not a lot of people that, you know, from what you said, it's like music is like you've ingrained it into your DNA, like you live it on a daily, like daily, hourly, secondly basis, and it's a part of your physical being. So that's what it takes, though, to do what you do and to get to a certain level. That's what it takes. But like, yeah, I see that right away, and it's sometimes there's certain people that emulate that, but sometimes it takes a little longer to see that in people. But yeah, with you, just from this conversation, I can tell like you love what you do so much, and you're like 100% submerged in it, and you live it, you breathe it. You've bled for it. It is absolutely.
I've eaten top ramen for it. You know?
yeah. We all, you know, we've struggled through it. So, and there's been crazy ups and downs, but yeah.
I'll give you a good full circle that involves the guitar, the studio history, and just the unit. Again, I could not have. No amount of money could have made these things happen. Honestly, again, it's just being in the right place at the right time. And like we say, you collect these weird skills that one day, like being here and going, well, what do I do with a stack of tapes and a dead the tape machine? Well, I'll help fix the tape machine because I know how to solder and I know how to read a schematic, and I'll do what I can to fix it, and I can wire my own stuff, and I'll clean off the tapes, and I'll try to use the skill. I know how to edit things and fix them, and all the little skills all come into play. And then I'm at the point now, again, this is the weird kind of crashing of all these little worlds of being a weird guitar nerd, being a music theory nerd, being a studio nerd, being a sound design nerd, and just it's all the same to me. And then one day, again, the products I was working on, and I did finish a couple of my guitar projects here. By the time I was here, I had to finish other things. So I finished a Marshall pedal called Lion here, and I finished a pedal called Enigmatic, which was just a Dumble pedal. Very mythical Dumble amp. I did most of the work over there between doing other things, and nailed it over there. So sometimes I'd finish things here, and then I'll just say how this whole thing wrapped in a very weird way is I get a call one day because there's a venue called Sphere in Vegas where, everyone has to be in ears. There's no amps on stage.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
You can't do it because the way the back wall is set up, the speakers are behind you. You end up with almost a half a second of delay before the latency hits your ears. Yeah. So you have to stay in ears. So I get a call from my office going, from my other guy, Bill Putnam, who owns the place. He's like, well, I got a number from somebody who really wants to talk to you. And for years, as I was here working on this project, and Everyone talked about the years Joe Walsh used to hang out here and record in the 80s for a long time. And it was just weird because one day I'd walked across, and Sandy can verify this too, was a tape that just said Walsh Fleetwood that had been sitting on the shelf for 40 years. But I get a call like, hey, we gave your number to Joe Walsh. He's going to call you. I'm thinking, what? Joe Walsh is going to call me? That's just weird. That's just wacky. And I get a call, and it's Joe Walsh. He's like, hey, I got your number from the Edges Tech Dallas Shoe, who used to work for me in the 70s. Again, that's just weirding me out, too. I'm like, okay, because I feel like I'm just like a janitor around here. I'm just a dude who breaks crap and fixes it. It never computes for me. He's like, I want to come over. I want to work on, I have all your pedals, your Marshall pedal, your Tweed pedal, and your AC30. Can we walk through some stuff? I need to work on an inner, like, direct system for Sphere. We're going to do the Sphere for months. I'm like, okay. And then I tell him, well, you have to come here as I'm working here now. I kind of dismantled my home. Half of my house is actually a studio. I have two now. I have a console still there. Of course it is. It's a guitar locker and 500 pedals and we have drum sets and B3s and Rhodes for my wife's set up there. But I'd moved my important guitar stuff here because I was just here all day working on the projects for the plugin and other stuff. I said, well, I told him where I was at. He's like, what? You're where? Like, I was there a lot in the 80s. He's like, well, just come over here. You'll know the door where I'm at. And the weird thing is, I sort of cleaned up some of those tapes, and Sandy was like, well, let's transfer a couple. Let's just see, and we'll just surprise them. And I think this is okay to tell the story, but he got here and we worked on it, but he was so sweet. We worked on a bunch of stuff. And I said, okay, well, he's like, I can't believe I'm here. I haven't been here in years. I said, well, he met Sandy. I said, well, Sandy had something that you'd done here that we wanted to see if it was real. And he saw the machine sitting there next to my desk, and I said, I went ahead and put it in and transferred it for you so you could hear it. But we have to finish our work first because I had to remember, I need to get his sounds together. Yeah. Most importantly is I have to forget who he is and just like work first. Yeah. So, okay, now we can screw around. I played him this reel, and he's like, holy shit, I remember that now. That's Mick Fleetwood and me jamming together in the middle of the night in 1985.
Fuck.
And it's like, holy shit, there's no documented recording of these two ever being on a record together. And he was just like, this is great. And he's like, we should finish this. I'm like, yeah, you should finish this, and I'll give you. He's like, no, I'll just stay here and finish it. Let's just finish it. And in fact, he goes, I have a record called Confessor I did here. See if you can find that. And he just got so excited because you see him go, holy, these are things he recorded. He was excited to hear again.
Of course, yeah.
And it made me feel really happy to just be the person who was able to clean the dust off, find this on a shelf that had just been put in a locker and sat in storage, to fix the machine, to get the tape baked. I baked it, cleaned it, fixed the splices. All the archival things you would do to make this playable, did that. Because I like doing it. It's like fixing an old car, which I don't know how to fix cars, but it's the equivalent of having a busted up car in your driveway, and every once in a while, I'll fix this and fix this. And
yeah, it's like you resurrected it. You brought it back.
Brought it back, and Sandy's like, I've been looking at that tape for 40 years, wondering what's on it. And then to have Joe here on the premises, hearing it, and then he says something funny. It's just so hilarious. He would come every week. We'd work on the sounds, and then one day he's like, let's go to my warehouse. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I have stuff around the corner. I was like, well, don't forget to take your tapes. Sandy's going to give them to you. And he's like, oh, no, you hold on to them for me. I trust you now. You're the guy. And then he comes back with 10 more tapes from his closet. I'm like, oh, jeez. You were supposed to take this stuff and go home with it. And it's like, no, here's some more. Because you know what it is? He's excited for music, to hear stuff he hadn't done in 40 years. He's like, I want to fix that now. Because if somebody found a tape of me going, well, here's the multi-track, and it's worth something, and maybe you could fix it, and it's some recording with a drummer who's maybe not alive anymore, or a drummer you don't play with, I'd be like, oh man, that might be worth.
Of course, or just to having them like on a drive, or just be able to listen to them again. Yeah,
it's amazing. So for me, that was worth more than any amount of money you could have won the lottery. To me, that's winning the musical lottery of getting to sit in a room with someone's playing. I've heard since I was a kid, and just sitting on the couch and playing guitar, and you forget who they, because you're just you spend so many hours and hours with this person working on sounds and working things out, and then forgetting like, oh yeah, I'll see you next week, Joe. And you were like, holy crap, that's Joe Walsh. And you forget. And then he was so nice about it. A few more weeks into all of this process, he needed a Telecaster, and I had one, and I had put a humbucker in the neck. He played it. I hate your pickup. You need to get a better pickup. Like, I know I meant to change it. A week later, he's like, I brought you something. I'm like, you didn't bring me anything. We can work on your sense. He pulls out a Seymour Duncan humbucker in the box, brand new. He's like, I bought you a pickup for your telly. Just out of nowhere. He said, do you want me to help you put it in? Like, I can solder it, but he was so, because that's what guitar geeks do for other guitar geeks.
Yeah.
Like, dude, fix your guitar. I can fix this. And he was so unnerved by the shitty sounding crappy humbucker. Hey, he bought me a new one. Just like, let's just put it in. And it was just the fact that he remembered that for a whole week to go, I got to pick up for you. Those are the people you want in your life that help you. And I always find that the people I like to hang out with are the ones that never get jealous of someone's success.
Totally. That's so important. That's so important.
It's so important because as I move along in this business, and I have moved along, I wouldn't say up. I just keep doing the same thing, but I feel like I'm still here. All of my friends come with me. The ones that are talented, like, you should call that guy. You should work at it. If we all want each other to do well. And I have a very small circle of friends that are all really helpful of each other. Like, dude, you need that shirt? Come out. You can borrow it. Yeah. Or I recommended you to a gig. Because everybody wins.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's frustrating when, people think, well, if I help this person with a gig or whatever, it takes away from me. But that's not true. It helps everybody. It elevates everybody. And some people just never can't get that through their head. But it's so true, man. Yeah. It's so true.
And man, because there was a time when somebody recommended me for something, and all of the gigs I've almost never had a resume. I've worked for a lot of large companies, but it was always because I worked with somebody on a project. And they go, just call this guy.
It's word of mouth is so powerful. It's the most powerful thing, honestly. Yeah. Like, yeah, you can have a great resume. You could have a great social media presence. You could have great credits or whatever. But it's like, if it's so valuable, if you're like top of mind for that, it's like people just know, just like you said, call this guy. That's the most powerful thing for sure.
And maybe it's worth giving you this interesting stories. I think it explains why and how I got here and why I'm still here and get to work with everybody here, but also have my job where I get to still design cool stuff. Is I was never meant to work at UI. I never thought I'd work there. Didn't want to. Didn't think about it. But there were friends of mine 10, 12 years ago that started working there. Because I'm so guitar-centric that UA never made real guitar stuff. It was not a guitar company. It was a pro audio company.
Yeah.
Plugins, great plugins. I used the stuff. Friends were there. And I always used all the cards and all the other stuff. But even then, like, I accidentally worked here because I get a call from my friend Greg. He's like, hey, I'll give your number to the guy, Bill Putnam Jr., who owns, his father started all of this stuff back in the 50s. And he's our current guy, and he just wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh, he's going to be in LA doing an AAS talk. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, dude. Because Bill plays guitar too. And I said, oh, sure, I'd love to hang. I went to an AAS talk at the Sportsman's Lounge, which is our lodge, which is not really here anymore. There used to be this funky hotel there on Ventura Boulevard.
Mm-hmm. Now there's an Erewhon.
Erewhon and a Sugarfish, which is great sushi, expensive, but the most expensive deli, Erewhon. Yeah. It's all fancy now, but back then it was still just some dining rooms, and you do a convention there and park your tour bus where all of my friends, musicians, stayed there. I went there and hung out with them, and the funny thing was he's like, well, you want to hang Sunday? And coincidentally, I said, dude, I can't. But we hang out some more and talk. I said, well, but I can't hang out Sundays. Well, I said, well, why? Well, I'm actually going to sit in with the Zappa band at the Roxy Sunday night with my wife. I'm friends with Diesel. Sometimes we do these little funny end of the night kind of guest things. He's like, well, that's funny because technically I was going to try to see you, and then I'm going to that gig. Like, well, that's weird because you'll see me at the end of the night being the guest at the Roxy with the Zappa group. And so that was just weird. And then he finally, that was just odd. And the next night he's like, okay, man, why don't you come work for us? I'm like, nope. Man, you're awesome, and I had a great time hanging, but you don't do guitar stuff. I would be bored. And I'm just completely honest. Like, I just nothing I could do there. I just love guitar. If I can start with guitar, I don't mind doing everything else.
That was going to be one of my questions for you too, because I noticed, like when people think of universal audio, they think pro audio, like compressors and interfaces. But do you get handsy with any of that technology, or are you focusing on the guitar pedals and the plugins and whatnot?
I do, and I have developed stuff that was not guitar centric, like really the Sound City plugin wasn't really specifically for guitar.
Yeah.
But for me, the fun part was I knew that so many guitar records were done here that it made me excited to go, okay, now I get to work on the Nirvana years. I get to work on the Fleetwood Mac years.
Yeah.
Because it's all stuff I had in my head and learned and knew. So then the fact that I knew somewhere there was a guitar made me excited.
Yeah.
Because I love playing drums too, but again, the guitar is my entryway. It's the gateway to get into the rest of it. So yeah, because no one thinks of Sound City, it's not a guitar plugin, but it made me so happy to do that. To get to go, now I get to get the drum sound that goes with the guitar sound and the bass sound. And I've done other plugins for the company that were not guitar centric, but just because I thought they were awesome and fun to do, but that was the one nice thing when they said, look, if you come here, what if you get to just be a guitar department? You'll be the first guy, and we'll leave you alone, and you'll figure some stuff out. And I thought, well, it would be really fun. And another guy said, well, I wish we could do something with guitar that included old stuff. So we designed and came up with this thing called an aux box, which was this thing you could put on your Marshall, 100-watt Marshall, and make it completely quiet and do the cab modeling and all that stuff. So I worked on that in secret for like a good year and a half, doing all the cab modeling and working on the whole thing. And that was the first time UA made a dedicated guitar product. And they were true to their word. They're like, here's the PhD professor from Stanford to help you do the algo work. Give me a great team, and we worked on this, and it came out, and thankfully somebody bought it, or else I'd literally been working the taco truck, dude, because I couldn't prove anyone was going to buy that thing. UA was not a guitar company. It's like, oh, we're going to make a load. Like nobody goes to guitar and said, give me a load for my amp.
So that's what started it all then.
That was the first product that started it all. And I said, okay, that sounds like fun, because no one's done it like this. I'm in.
That's incredible. So like they saw that you could bring so much value, so they created a job for you there.
They say, hey, be the guitar guy. We think this project is going to fly, so start working on this. See if you can make it work. And I went over there, and people were like, you work at UA? What are you doing? Like, I can't tell you, but it's not going to be what you expect. It took a year plus of just saying that to everybody. Like, and the company I was with before, one of my best friends in the world, Josh Fide in the Voodoo Lab. And in fact, I think you have a question. In fact, I'll tell you, there's a question you said you were probably going to ask me.
Okay, to wrap it up, what was one of the darkest periods in your career, and what did you do to overcome that?
So there's a couple. So I think, because I was just thinking about a really dark period for me was, and again, it was in my creative side, was I spent a lot of years at Line 6, and at some point I felt like I needed to get away from digital modeling and where a guitar was going with that, because we're making Variax modeling guitars, pods, all this other stuff, and I'd done it already. I was just tired. I worked a lot. I was still working that stuff all day long, and then all through the night doing other stuff, and it's like, I need a break. I need to get back to analog again, like go play my real amps again and just take a break. And previously I had worked on a pedal years and years and years. We missed a whole other area of my work that I didn't even tell you about, but I sent my friend Josh in the late 90s, like, hey, can you make this pedal for me? And he called it a Sparkle Drive, which was kind of a parallel clean with a distortion in a box, and all the Nashville guys used it. And so I'd have crazy ideas, and I'd have friends like, hey, can you just make this for me? And they'd put it out, and I didn't want anything for it. Just like these picks. I love Jimmy Dunlop's one of my favorite people in the world. I'd be like, hey, can you make a pick for me? And he would just like, make a pick, because I've just known all these guys forever from being old and being around the business forever. And so sometimes I just float these ideas out and just say, can you make this for me? But again, the weird thing was with Josh and Voodoo Lab is, again, I felt great just going back to analog stuff. And then again, when the UA offer came in, I told, I didn't want to leave my friend Josh and running Voodoo Lab. But when Bill and my friend Greg and Lev and those guys there said, look, if you come over here, you'll get to do something really creative. No one's tried to do this before. that was the motivator to go, well, I'm mixing analog, my love of analog, now with digital. And it's not going to be in a way where someone's going to tell me, well, that's good enough. And just makes, it's like, no, they said make the best you can do. Make it sound the best, use the best resources. We are literally handing you a doctor of DSP from Stanford to come up and help you do this. He will do and implement whatever you ask him. Beautiful guy named Dave Berners, smart as hell, sweet, great player too, bass player. And I had to sit with Josh, and one low point was telling one of my best friends in the world, like, dude, I have to leave this company for my own sanity, because now that I know that this possibility of, wow, I only have so many years left in my ears. And that's what I told him. I was like, look, I'm getting to an age where I can still critically hear things, and, you know, maybe I have a good 10 years of doing that kind of critical listening left in me. You know, before you can't fight the age of your ears. You lose high end, you lose things.
Yeah.
I said, dude, they're going to let me just do this stuff, and I really need to go there and try this. And he's like, bro, I understand. It was almost like trying to fire myself. But so that was a low mixed with a really weird high point of going, look, I'm going to go somewhere unknown. And that was exciting to me, because it was just, my brain was like, all these cool things I could do. I could work on trying to make the best Marshall amp model, to make the best cab modeling, use all the cabs and microphones that I collected from my recordings that I knew I wish somebody would have used the real M160 ribbon mic from 1966 with the original Tuchel connectors and original white 421s. I bought all this shit. Every year I made money, I kept buying this crap gear whenever I found it. And now it's amassed to the point where, I got a pair of 60s M60s. I got the black 421s from 74, the white ones from 68, all the regular guitar shit.
So your home studio is a
pile of crap.
A candy store for
guitar players,
for guitarists, and
guitars,
I'm sure for audio engineers too.
It's like, which cab do you want? You want 25s, 30s. You want this you want a 414 on this Altec speakers that sound like Randy Rhoads. I have it. I just kept buying every time I find it. But that was a place I knew I could implement all of the weird things I had learned about recording and guitar. And it's like, well, that was the carrot. It's like, okay, I got to do that. So that was a weird low and high. And one other thing I did, I'd say a real low point is, I think it happens in music, is when you de-stress. I'm going to go the really darkest point, which again, some people don't make it out as, you know, we were in a business where sometimes you get high five for partying.
Yes.
And I mean, yeah, because what sounds great after you get, look, dude, let's go do have some margaritas and stay up till 4 a.m, wake up with a hangover. I was working so much that, you know, that kind of lifestyle did not work for me. And I found myself working so hard that the only way I could do it was like, let's just go have dinner and drink a bunch of, get kind of hungover, and then you wake up the next day and now you're tired and you're hungover and you're having a 4-shot latte just to wake back up for an 8 a.m. meeting. And then do it all again. It was like the years when I was a musician, just doing touring and working. So you can only survive so many years gigging, hangovering, gigging, flying, hangovering, hotel room, hangover.
Yeah.
It wears you out. And at some point about 14 years ago, I just got to a point where I had to just say, I'm going to quit drinking, because I don't think I'm doing the best work I possibly can now.
So you've been 14 years sober?
Yes.
Incredible. I'm 10 years behind you. I'll be 4 years pretty soon.
Oh, dude, congratulations. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and I had the same realization, man. Like, yeah, you know, the alcohol, the lifestyle, it's like baked into music. It's baked into the entertainment industry, and it's kind of alienating if you decide not to participate, because people think there's something wrong. You're not
social, there's something.
Yeah, and they think, well, there's something wrong with you if you don't drink, which isn't true. But I totally relate. Like, it's just, man, I can't tell you, like, the first year of sobriety, I was just like, it's hard at first, but it brings such clarity, and man, you should be so much more productive, and it's like it's the best decision I've ever made.
It's you become a much better husband, boyfriend, brother, son.
Yes.
You're present, and not that I wasn't before, but I could always do better, and I feel like a point that my wife now, and she was with me during that period. You know, again, you're investing in yourself, because, you know, honestly, I've done the best work of my life in those last 14 years, because I'm completely present, and I don't wake up with a hangover, and I don't feel like I think there's an uncomfortable thing that comes with musicians where sometimes you feel like, oh, I play better if I'm like a couple of shots in, or I'm funnier with one shot just to loosen up. You're trying to loosen up, and you know what? Screw that. I don't need to impress anybody anymore. Somebody, I don't care anymore. I just don't fucking care. If I want to hang out with somebody and we're hanging, great. I don't need to be the center of attention. I don't feel like I need to be funny for anybody's sake or be the clown. Because what happens when everyone starts drinking? Oh, he's really funny when he's drunk. Let's go. And that's funny when you're a teenager. There's always the angry drunk, and there's the comedian drunk, and there's the one that always pulls a slash and falls off the stage, and you got to pick him and drag him out home. But that decision for me meant, like, literally in these last few years, I can feel confident that I'm not going to forget to check in with your mom. Call your mom and say, hi, how's it going? Check in with your brother. Call your wife. Maybe I could say just do things that are more present. Check in on friends. You remember, like, hey, sometimes you, in your sobriety and your realization of, oh man, I could have been a better friend. Just because usually if you're the drunk one in the room, they're taking care of you at the end of the night. Mm-hmm. And it's always nice to be the friends like, oh yeah, here, I'll drive you home. Dude, I'm by default now the designated driver for anybody. Or if you call me at 4 a.m, I'm actually going to pick up the phone and be completely present because I'm like, oh, I don't have a hangover, and I turn the ringer off because I'm. So there's a darker part of that stuff too. But again, music was weird because as a kid playing in bands, it was cute. Oh man, I'm playing in a club, and oh man, I get open bar, so I can have all the drinks I want, and I get to play and make money. That's neat for a few years because in the music business wants you to party. It seems like fun.
Yeah.
The 3 martini lunch. Ooh, that's great. It's not great when you're supposed to be the creative one and you burn out.
Right. Yeah. It's a trap for sure. But I'm glad you made that decision, and it's true. You do your best work, and I think I realized too. It's your clarity allows you to discover who you truly are and to learn more about yourself and to find yourself and to accept yourself. Because when even if like you drink, but it's not a problem, but you're just intoxicated often, or you rely on it as a crutch. It's just you're masking yourself. And I found that, of course, there's plenty of people that can live their life and drink and they have no problems, and that's great. But for some of us, we need to make that decision, and I'm glad you made that decision because it's led you to where you are, and it's now you've gone above and beyond what you ever thought with your career. So yeah,
I'm shocked by it, and I mean, congratulations to you too, man.
Thank you.
It's not an easy decision to make, and a lot of people make the decision and have to repeat the decision 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Right.
And that's okay too, because again, it comes back to like invest in yourself. Hopefully like yourself enough to go, dude, you're just torturing yourself and covering up the real issues.
Right.
And that's the one thing I've tried to do now is if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Or there's one thing I really try to do is hopefully in my age now is share information. I want to have the people around me be happy, and I want my family to be happy. I want my friends who are players and I work with and just people I've known since I was a kid to be happy, because a lot of my friends did not make it out of that.
Same. Yeah.
I think by the time you get to 30 something, you start realizing, oh man, that guy was like 26 and like did not make it. Whether literally not here anymore, or just can't get a job because they went to rehab and they're not functioning anymore. It is a trap, man. And then the age we're at now, unless you go get a yearly physical and stay on top of your health and watch your blood pressure, watch all the salt in your diet, you just don't make it. This business it's a funny one. It's the only time I've thought, like, what other job do you get where you're encouraged to kind of party?
Right.
And in Los Angeles, that's dangerous.
Totally. It's so detrimental to any kind of longevity. It's like you're just running yourself into the ground if you can't handle it, if you can't be balanced with it. I think that's the most important thing is if there's people that can balance it fine and they know how to make it work in their career. But I think there's so many people that have not been able to balance it, and I've seen a lot of really talented individuals not live out their full potential, and it's really sad to see that. But man, James,
I feel like I just brought the whole room down. I'm sorry.
No. This is good. This is a big theme of the the podcast, and I love talking about this stuff because everyone deals with it. It's so relatable, and in music, yeah, we can talk about all the technicalities and the career stuff, but this is really at the core of it, is because it's the base of who we are and how, you know, we're either looking within and we're dealing with ourselves and our demons, or we're masking it all with alcohol or with drugs or with whatever, you know. And it's such an important thing that I feel like more people need to talk about, especially in our industry.
And don't be embarrassed for saying it. That's the other thing, is I was embarrassed. They're like, oh man, I'm embarrassed to say I don't drink because I'm going to go to a gig and I'm feel weird. Don't, man.
Absolutely not. You should absolutely not feel embarrassed at all whatsoever. It's a superpower, in my opinion. Like it's made me so much more just confident and reliable in myself, and I think, yeah, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in any kind of better, like, improvement decision, like, for yourself, or any kind of, like, self-improvement. There's no shame in that whatsoever. And if you're around people that shame you for that, like, get rid of them. You know what
exactly. I mean? He'd say, I've changed my phone number from those days. And the group of folks that were there for the fun part, that's all they were there for. And no disrespect, go keep doing that. I'm going to be over here and go make dinner and take the dog for a walk and go make music with some friends and go dust off some old tapes and go change strings on some old guitars and remember that I did that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that's I think an amazing thing to feel like holy crap, I'm still here. I'm so lucky to get to be where we're at now, to even have gotten out of a small town based on playing a guitar. That's already like winning the lottery and a friggin' miracle.
True.
So to me, to think, well, now I get here, and what am I going to just waste it by being hungover all day? What kind of dipshit does that? You're wasting this gift that was given to you, and until your brain realizes, like, oh yeah, I guess I should be better with what I was given and what I worked for. And it's just one of those things you learn when you get older, you know, because it's all fun until it isn't. And somebody did ask me, I'll cap on it. This was like it's like, well, I was really good at that too, but I'm really good at not drinking too. You know, I did my years. I had my fun with it. I was awesome at it. I did all the dumb things you would think. You know, we made
our mistakes, but now it's time to take that time back if possible and put our energy elsewhere.
Yeah, like I just want to say I'm going to get to my cave across the parking lot here and go work on some really fun stuff that's exciting. Like I can't wait to go to work every day.
Yeah, it's such a gift, man. If you know, when you have that, when you have your career and you have something that is your purpose and that you're excited to get up and go to work and you're excited to just continue on a day to day, and it's such a gift. So if you have that, it's just cherish it and don't fuck it up, and you know, work on yourself, invest in yourself, and that's all we can do. That's why we're here. It's for our purpose, and you know, and you're here doing it, man. So thank you so much for sharing. And
dude, you're kidding me? Thank you. Shit, dude, it's what an honor to be here. And it's hopefully someone took a nap in the middle of this and came back. It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Oh, dude, I feel like we could talk for like 3 or 4 hours about this stuff. There's so much we didn't cover, but that's cool. Well, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening and for watching, and cheers.